Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo bolo. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. One last time, to all together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradhayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So, last week we finished up at verse number 26. This was at the end of the section that spoke about the duties and the activities of the person who has transcended the need for karma. We discussed last week when we know that someone has transcended the need to perform prescribed activities. What did we say that nature was? When does a person transcend the need to perform prescribed activities? Or if we go one step back further, what is the need of prescribed activities?
To perform as an offering?
Yes, but I mean, we can perform many things as an offering. But why do we need prescribed activities to offer to Krishna? Okay, otherwise what would happen?
Then we're not offering, and then we're not karmic reaction, but our mind isn't on Krishna.
That is true, but there's even one step lower than that we can fall. I mean, if we were not told to wake up in the morning, to brush your teeth, take bath, go to sleep on time, and then, cook something every day, if these were not prescribed duties mentioned in the scriptures, what would our day be like?
I think it would be chaotic, basically.
Completely.
It would be anarchism, because there would be no structure.
There'd be no structure, pretty much. And then what would we be compared to? Animals. So to raise us off the platform of being animals, every human being is given prescribed duties. So it is to regulate one's life, it is to bring one to the platform of goodness, actually, that prescribed duties are offered. When does one transcend the need for prescribed activities? Huh? Okay. Can you describe that in terms of the state of one's consciousness or the state of one's intelligence or one's heart? Yes, but can you elaborate? What is he realizing? What happens to him? We referenced a verse last time that was 269, as being that transition point, so to speak. Something happens to an individual which allows him to progress to the next stage of his spiritual development. So if you read 269, what does the translation say? Can someone read out the translation?
What is the night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective stage.
Right. So what did that mean?
Self-control is awakening.
Self-control?
Night being the awakening for the self-control.
Yes, but what was the day and night? Prabhupada, in this purport, he says, there are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. So we discussed two types of intelligence. One intelligence is going outwards, externally, meaning that it impels the mind and the senses to push outwards for outside experiences. But the other kind of intelligence is intelligence that goes within. It takes every experience and relates it for the purpose of internal development. Now, what was it that signified the transition between those who need to perform prescribed activities and those who have transcended that need?
They've gained the knowledge.
What knowledge have they gained?
Self-realization, knowledge of the absolute truth. So they're not working on or thinking on the intelligence of the material only. They're beyond.
Okay. Could you distinguish that in terms of intelligence going outside and intelligence going within? What has to happen for that transition to take place?
The introspection and thoughtfulness.
Okay, so in other words, they're concentrating more on their actual spiritual nature, and their nature is being a servant of Krishna. So that requires purification. And what is fundamentally happening? A disassociation of one's identity with matter and a connection of one's identity with Krishna.
This is transcending the need for material body. That's what I've written down from the last class. They transcend the need for the material body.
They transcend the identification, more precisely, with the material body.
Identify with the soul, that they have a sense of responsibility to Krishna's mission as well.
So it's kind of like if someone was really, and actually this has happened, in the past there have been devotees who have entered the movement and they've really wanted to, offer food to the public, like do some kind of welfare activity. That's been their strong inclination. Now, strictly speaking, this is not spiritual in and of itself. Giving clothes to people, helping people with education or what have you. And in the past, devotees have told them this is all material activity. Just, push it aside and focus on chanting Hare Krishna. Now, the difficulty in such cases is that, yes, if one just chanted Hare Krishna and, worked from a temple, that would be wonderful. But for this particular devotee who had that nature had to be engaged. So he was told you can't engage it. Now he's currently outside. He's a very, very big, He's like a Salvation Army. He has opened that up in the US, and he's doing really well. But imagine if he could have been connected, if he could have connected that to Krishna. What impelled him to go outside was that his nature was not being fulfilled. So to the extent that one identifies with one's nature, it is a mistake to try and restrict that nature and force them into a mold of how you give Krishna consciousness or how you live life in general. Rather, by prescribing certain boundaries around their nature, you regulate their nature and allow their nature to be purified by their offering their activities to Krishna. And that will come strongly through this last section of the 3rd chapter. It is really, really important that we don't underestimate how strong a person's nature is, because it can be really strong. And until and unless real purification of heart takes place, and what that means is that, a strong identification with Gopinath is there, it is difficult for one to give up one's material nature entirely. So this transition that is being spoken of here is actually quite an elevated one. It's not just, you enter the movement and within, 1 day or 2 days it necessarily happens. It can, but it's unusual. Usually, it needs to be a strong cultivation of hearing and chanting and engaging one's nature for one's purification. So, in verse 26, the responsibility of someone who has crossed that line, who has come to a stage of not requiring prescribed duties for the purification of his heart or her heart. What their duties are towards someone who is making that journey, who is on that journey, are being described. So let's read verse 26. Na buddhi bedam janaye agyanam karma sanginam joshaye sarva karmani vidvan yukta samacharan. Translation.
So as not to disturb the mind with ignoring them attached to the fruit exhaustive prescribed duties. A learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna.
So, Vidvan Yukta Samacharan. The word Vidvan is important. Vidvan doesn't just mean one who is theoretically learned, one who is practically understood. He's himself fixed on this path. He really understands what's going on. Na buddhi bedam janayet. Beda means to split. So he doesn't tell a person, this karma that this, maintaining family and everything that you're doing, ultimately one day you have to give it up anyway. So there's no point in putting a lot of emphasis on it. Has anybody heard this kind of talk before? And it is destructive. Just because it confuses. Beda means split. It splits the intelligence of someone who is not yet ready to accept such an instruction. And it causes them to go into two minds. One, why am I doing what I'm doing? But at the same time, I need to do what I'm doing. I don't know how I can live without doing what I'm doing. The split in their intelligence is destructive. Why?
Because their nature is one way.
And if their intelligence is split, then?
They're forced to, they've got like cognitive dissonance.
Yes, which means that they cannot actually follow what they're doing properly. And they can't actually use what they're doing to purify their heart. So never ever split a person's intelligence. How do you tell whether a person is ready or not ready to accept such an instruction?
They start to behave in that way.
For example?
I guess if it's their true nature and they're ready for it. Perhaps the example that you're giving of family life, I guess perhaps the parent might become just a little bit more detached from their children, but not in an unloving way.
But allowing them the freedom to grow.
Yes.
That is true. I had an example for myself. When I was 18, I wanted to join the Australian Army Reserves. I'd gone through a 2-month-long process and I'd actually qualified. Now, in a suit and tie, I just faced the last army board. I'd gotten in. I came to the temple. My spiritual master was there, so I went up to see him. And I offered obeisances, and he was like, "Why are you wearing a suit and tie?" And I told him. He's like, "Army, huh?" And then he spoke about his experience in being drafted in the Vietnam War. And then he said, "But you know that people in the army have a terrible culture. I mean, they speak about ladies in a derogatory way. Their vocabulary, their style of life, their values are really degraded. And if you associate with them, then it is possible that these values can enter your heart. And I was attached to my spiritual master, but I was also really attached to wanting to go into the army because I, for example, just spent 2 months in that process. And I told him, I have a strong desire to go, but if you say I won't go, then I won't go. And it was clear from my face that I was attached and I wanted to go. So my spiritual master, he called my mother and he said, "What do you think of this?" My mother said, "My son wastes his time around the house. I mean, he just loiters here and there. I think it's, he should do something. He should, go out there, be more disciplined and learn these things." Spiritual master thought for a while. I asked him, "What do you think?" He said, "See, in principle, I'm okay, but on 3 conditions. 1, you will constantly stay in touch with your family when you're in the army. 2, if any of your parents detect that your behavior or character is deteriorating, then at their saying so, you will instantly leave. And 3, after your tenure in the army, which will end after you finish university, that was already my plan, you will spend 6 months in the Brahmacharya ashram, because there you will, wipe out the negative association you've had in the army." And I was kind of shocked. I mean, Brahmacharya ashram, is that for me? Isn't that just somebody else? But then the more I thought about it, the more I liked the idea. So I said, yes, okay. My parents were like, yeah, he's going to agree with anything related to the ashram. He's not really going to go. Okay, that's fine. We'll take care of him. We'll make sure he's okay. But going back to how my spiritual master handled the situation, what did he do?
He didn't kill off your son?
Yes.
Channelize.
Sorry?
But channelize, saying that when computing conditions.
Yes.
Back to track. So whatever is the negative quality, if at all you care, you didn't have to wait out by doing the next exercise you are going to do.
Yes.
So whatever the minus had, it will wipe off when you go to 6 months away to ashram. So that will nullify this all negative thing. You will back normal. So that means he want to do whatever he want to do, not being break on that. Less you can go. By doing those, so he want to make sure that you want to come back to normal, for which he will give you condition. So if you oblige the condition, yes, you can go.
Yes.
Directly saying that.
Yes.
So he saw your commitment and you were motivated. So basically, when you're committed and you really want to do it, so that you put all your efforts into this. So the commitment is important, because if you're not sure which way and why I'm doing, then you're not committed and motivated to do that. So you're convinced, like, yes, this is the right thing to do for me. And then basically you put your effort, like you said, 2 months. So if we're saying thing with Krishna consciousness, if we don't have the faith of belief, not convinced, then if we hear something, then we would be like shaken. Should I? So not that commitment over here.
Thank you. Was there another hand?
Yeah, I think another really good thing in line with Srila Prabhupada was always adding things. So he didn't say, "Oh, don't do that." He said, "Okay, add this other thing which is going to be really beneficial the time in the Brahmacharya ashram," which is a really good way of teaching someone, okay, that's your nature, I understand that, but let's add this on top, so then that whole time you're in the army training, then you can be meditating on your life in Brahmacharya and how beneficial that will be for your spirituality.
And that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I lasted in the Army Reserves for 2 months. I mean, in the sense that we would go on camps and I couldn't stand sleeping on dirt in the middle of rain, not getting enough sleep. And especially, the kind of association was really bad. So I chickened out after 2 months. But I stayed in the ashram for almost 4.5 years. So this was the jewel. I mean, to using a situation where I was, because the thing is, attachment is transitory. Someone who's really focused on something right now won't be the same, just a little bit down the track. So if my spiritual master had cut me then, what is the alternative? Sit at home and loiter around? But instead, he put a shining jewel inside, a seed of an idea, and he would follow up with me throughout. I was 19 when he gave me this idea. I joined the ashram when I was 25. So whenever he would see me, so how's your ashram life going? Or if anybody called my parents, for service, anything, for Guru Maharaj's service, Guru Maharaj would ask their son, when is he joining the ashram? So he would keep sending reminders through like that. But the reality is that, the attachment was it was partially expressed, and then I myself threw it away. And often this is the case. But then look at the shining positive that I was able to get out of it.
Is it also probably you just have enough security from your previous karma, and you just have enough security, and Krishna has mercy on you, and that's why you met the right people, and your spiritual master's mercy was freely flowing, and you got the message.
The thing was, I was at.
I'm sorry.
No.
Because in the yesterday class we were explaining how we can't remember Krishna without the mercy of Krishna. We can't do anything without the mercy of Krishna.
I was really attached to my spiritual master. And the reason I was attached was not anything spiritual. He would just give me a lot of affection as a kid. So because of that attachment, I wanted to do what he said. The other thing was that I had read Prabhupada Lilamrita growing up, and I wanted to be like the devotees who would surrender to Srila Prabhupada. So yes, that innate desire was there, but too the attachment was very strong. And the thing with children is that if they are very attached to a superior, especially a superior who's very, very Krishna conscious, you will see the child just picks up like exponentially, very, very fast. So yes, there may have been some little sukriti, but it was also the attachment that made me want to do it also. I fought with my parents a lot after that. I want to go. No, you can't go. What about your health? No, I want to go. I will go. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Krishna will take care. But the thing is that it's the attachment that makes everything work. There are children who, for example, because of attachment to their parents, they take the line of their parents or their grandparents. Could be with, if the grandparents are doctors or grandparents are, some form of scientist or what have you, they follow in that line because of attachment. It is not, in that sense, an independent choice by the child. But this combination of this Vidwan here, of course, it can't just be like, ordinary sadhu. Not ordinary, and no sadhu is ordinary, but just sadhu who's not connected to that person. Nowadays, especially if that strong relationship is there, then you can just very quickly mold things. So this verse says, Na buddhi bedam janayed, one should not split a person's intelligence. What kind of person? Ajnanam. He is ignorant of what the actual purpose of his life is, or he's not clear in this perspective. Karma sanginam, who are attached to their prescribed duties, who need that sangha means association, who desire the association with their day-to-day activities. Joshayet sarva karmani, he should dovetail all their prescribed duties, all their inclinations, vidvan yukta samacharan. Vidvan yukta samacharan. By, he himself should connect it in some way. This individual cannot connect it by themselves. Sometimes, we say, oh, I have this desire, can I use this desire in some way? For example, there may be devotees who, recent example, true example, if they are good kirtaniyas, they may say, let me listen to some, movie songs or pop songs, because then I will get melodies that I can use and sing Hare Krishna. And sometimes if they're told, no, don't do that, just hear many other senior devotees sing, you can replicate those tunes. They sometimes get very upset. What? You think that other tunes in ISKCON don't come from these sources? Just see what Indra Prabhu did. These are the kind of arguments you get from people. But it is very hard for us to decide that engagement ourselves, often because such advice, self-advice, tends to protect our desires very carefully. And it gives us just the right amount of Krishna consciousness so that we don't change. But if it's direction given by a superior who understands us, who has affection for us, for whom we have a lot of attachment, then that advice will act beneficially. And some part of the advice may not be always palatable, but it's important to get that advice from someone else. Vidvan yukta samachara. So in his Prabhupada says, all rituals, all performances of sacrifices, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end, to sense gratification. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a realized person in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. The learned Krishna conscious person may act in such a way that the ignorant person working for sense gratification may learn how to act and how to behave. Although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may be directly engaged in service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. So this last line here, Prabhupada actually gives another point. What he says is, if someone has a lot of bhakti, meaning that the impressions of bhakti are strong, sometimes you can cut directly past that person's impressions and inclinations. You may find that, oh, this person has, sometimes you get a child, they may say something like, when I grow up, I just want to do kirtan. And then he may say, or, I want to become a cricket star. But then you notice that, the part of him, the child who wants to play cricket is not very strong. And the impressions of Krishna consciousness are very deep, especially love for kirtan. So sometimes you can just bypass that material nature because it's not so strong. And you can just say, well, would you like to go to Mayapur and learn instruments? Or why don't you come with me and whenever we go to house programs, you can lead kirtan. But constructive engagement for children directly based on their Krishna conscious impressions. And that is sometimes needed also. It's really important for parents, for counselors, for leaders to know when to let something slide, when to dovetail it, and when to cut it. All three are needed. When I was in the ashram, I would want to spend more time with my parents in the yearly trips I would take back to visit them. And in the Pune ashram, the standard was, 3 days in a year, you would visit your family. And I needed at least 2 or 3 weeks. And I would just, want to spend that time with them. But my counselor told me, you are far too attached. And he would normally give me a lot of affection, every inclination that I had for reading, for studying. I used to sing a lot. He would make sure I had engagements around the temple fitting my nature. But he saw this and he saw that it was detrimental. And he cut it. He said, no, you are not going. You are staying here. And you have to know when to cut. It's only someone who has a very strong relationship who knows when to cut and say, no, just focus on this now. And a counselor needs to have all three. When to let something slide. So sometimes, of course, in the ashram, you don't sleep during the day. But sometimes I would sleep during the day. And my counselor would say, try to avoid that. He would just let it slide. He wouldn't make a big issue of it. But then there were other times he would engage my nature, and other times he would straight cut it. Some things he would never tolerate, and some things he would let slide. So one has to have the expertise to know what to cut, when to cut, how to cut. And all of them are important. So Prabhupada says, although the ignorant man, the ignorant man here is someone who's more attached to prescribed duties, is not to be disturbed in his activities. A slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following prescribed duties. There's a verse by Narada Muni like this. In his instructions in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, 5th chapter, 1st canto Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says, Tyaktva swadharmam charanambujam harer Pajanna pakvota pate tato yadi yatra kvava badrama buddha mushyakim ko vartahapto bhajatam swadharmataha. So he says, what is the value of prescribed duties if they don't ultimately lead to Krishna consciousness? There's no point in doing everything strictly end to end if it ultimately doesn't lead to an increased taste for hearing and chanting. But suppose somebody might just, in a moment of inspiration, they might even give up their prescribed duties prematurely, and they may completely give themselves to Krishna consciousness. But because their devotional service is not fully ripened, bhajan apakva. Pakva means ripe, apakva means unripe. But because the fruit of their devotional service is as yet unripe, their inclinations, call them ta pate tatoyodi. Pata means to fall down. They fall down from that path of full Krishna consciousness. But Narada Muni says, well, what is the damage to them? They have experienced Krishna's shelter and protection, and that's something that will always stay with them. So as devotees, sometimes we feel like, I can't disturb this person. If this person has a certain inclination, I can't disturb them. That is not always correct. One has to assess the nature of the individual, assess the strength of one's relationship with that individual, and accordingly act in a particular way. If possible, one would take them to the highest level, but at the same time, one should be careful in terms of how one manages their nature. Actually, when Narada Muni himself was a boy, you had, the 4 great souls who spent the Chaturmasya months with Narada Muni and his mother. Very interestingly, the first thing they gave him were the principles of pure devotional service. The second thing they gave him was prescribed duties. And the question naturally arises, once you've given pure bhakti, why are you giving material instructions about dealing with the material world when you've already given the highest thing? As if, performing your prescribed duties in some way better than, or if you cannot perform full Krishna consciousness, why bother? But then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, explaining that transition, he writes, the sages understood that Narada Muni may or may not accept Grihastha life in the future. So should he get married, should he have to deal practically with the world, then the instructions they were going to give would allow his material activities to complement his cultivation of pure bhakti, rather than override them or disrupt them in some way. So they first gave him instructions of pure bhakti, and then they gave him practical instructions of how to deal with his nature, with the material world. And both instructions are important. Sorry? 26, we just finished 26, sorry. So we were just speaking about how the person in knowledge deals with someone who is ignorant. You can get someone who's ignorant with some bhakti, someone who's ignorant with a lot of bhakti, and how you would appropriately deal with them. Are there any questions about this verse? This is actually really, really important. Huh?
This is a text regarding Narada Bhakti Sutra. Is it something different kind of version of Bhakti?
No, it's pure bhakti, but he describes the principles of pure bhakti, and it's a treatise on pure bhakti. Okay. Text 27. These verses now, the next 3 verses describe the specific difference between a person in knowledge and a person who is ignorant. Text 27. Prakrite kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimodhatma kartaham iti manyate. Translation.
The strict soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the 3 modes of material nature.
So, prakrite kriyamanani gune. So this word gune refers to the 3 modes of nature belonging to prakriti. Prakriti meaning material nature. So the 3 modes of material nature which come from prakriti. Hare Krishna? Sorry, can we just keep it silent? The 3 modes of material nature which arise from material nature, they are the ones acting on the mind of the individual. By contact with the 3 modes, a person in a person's mind, various desires flash. And the bewildered spirit soul who doesn't understand the distinction between his own individual spiritual identity and the desires being flashed in his or her mind identifies themselves with the desires in their mind. So prakrite kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashaha. So actually the three modes of material nature themselves sitting in the mind, gune karmani sarvashaha, they are the ones inspiring certain activities. But ahankara vimudhatma, this person is a confused soul in terms of their identity. Ahankara means their actual nature, their sense of identity. Atma is about themselves. Vimudhatma, they are confused souls. Or in some translations, this is sometimes called someone who's a fool. Mudha means fool. Vimudha means superfool in that sense. So someone who is extremely confused or extremely bewildered about their actual identity, they don't understand that they are a spirit soul completely separate from their mind, intelligence, and everything else. And they just think, I want to go out today. Do they really want to go out? Who are they? They're a spirit soul and they've got nothing to do with their desires. I want to marry this person. Is that they, as a spirit soul, want to get married to that spirit soul? In their mind, it's just flashing a particular desire. And they identify with that desire and say, this is me. Most people nowadays tend to think that we make independent decisions. Is that really true, by the way? What are the things that actually influence their choices?
Media, so much. Just like advertising, films, popular culture.
Friends, social circles. Yes, very much. And we don't understand how deeply our decision-making is formed through these choices. Sometimes it's only when we are in other company and we see how differently how other people act, that we understand the extent of our conditioning. Urmila Mataji gives example that growing up from a young age, sorry, Hare Krishna, excuse me, Haribol, Mataji, can you please go out through that door? There's a class going on. Please go out through that door. So Urmila Mataji describes that from a young age of 2, practically until she was much older, her father, who was the CEO of a company, would spend 2 hours in the morning from 5 to 7 with her. And she developed such an attachment to her father, one, but also that morning time, where she tended to associate that morning time with a sense of security and a sense of well-being. And later on in life, for her, that morning time was always comfortable, whether she was before Krishna consciousness and afterwards. And she was in a Gurukul once, and she was asking someone, so why don't you wake up in the morning? And he said, I don't like the morning time. She was like shocked. Are there actually people who don't like waking up in the morning? And it got her reflecting, what is it that allows me to be so attached to the morning? And it was her upbringing, really, that time with her father. And there are... Can we just tell them?
There's a class going on. Can you please keep silent?
And we don't understand actually the extent to which our choices are formed by those formative years of that formative association. And it's only when we're in a situation where we are forced to reflect on why we make choices that we sometimes understand the background behind why we actually make those choices. So regardless of whether or not we even bring the 3 modes into light, which is a deeper understanding of the same concept, the reality is that we are not independent in making choices. But then here's the question. If everything is carried out by the 3 modes of nature, then I shouldn't be liable for what I do, right? Because it's the 3 modes of nature that are acting independently. Why should I have to suffer good or bad based on, what I'm forced to do?
You still do the action.
What do you mean by I still do the action?
Like if you still do something and gives you a karmic response, you've still done it, I guess, even if you were influenced. Like, No.
But I'm not the one doing the activity. If I'm super angry, and in that anger, I just go and smash somebody, the police says, why did you do that? I'm sorry, I was not myself.
It's the desire.
Huh?
It's the desire. We are the one.
Explain.
Like, for us to do any action, yes, we know that it's being done by the mood, but the root of that action comes from the desire that you have.
Okay, so?
So it's actually, you're asking a question like, why am I liable if the modes are doing?
But
Through the modes, the root cause of that one is our desire.
yeah, it's very, that's actually correct. I was about to slightly modify that by saying that we always have a choice. We choose to live by our mind, and therefore we are liable.
Free will. We have a free will.
Right. Now, in some instances where the free will has been abused sufficiently, then the freedom is very, very, very small, practically non-existent. How much freedom do animals have in choosing their activity? Practically none. They're completely controlled by the modes of nature. Can a tiger really practice non-violence by training of its intelligence? It's unusual. It hardly ever happens. But can a man practice non-violence? And that will be described by Krishna later on. If their intelligence is trained, they learn that I am separate from my choices. I'm separate from my mind. And I don't have to just follow what I feel. There's a distinction between I, the person, my mind. This is what it actually means to be learned. To understand the distinction between myself, my mind, and my intelligence. And to act based on my intelligence. That's what it means to be a learned man. There's a very interesting verse by Chanakya Pandit. He says, Matravat paradhareshu paradravyeshu loshtravat atmavat sarva bhuteshu ya pashyati sa pandita. So someone who throughout their learning is able to see other ladies apart from his wife as his own mother. He's able to see other people's possessions equal to stone on the street, in other words, not worth picking up. And he's able to identify other people's suffering and happiness as his own. Such a person is actually learned. Now you think about the quantity of desires that can arise in one's mind. If, for example, one is just looking at other people's wives, the kind of desires that arise in one's mind can be tremendous. But a learned man is someone who distinguishes himself from those desires. It's not that those desires just stop, but that person understands that this is not me, and I don't have to do this. And it may be that this person has, a much better house, much better car, many other possessions, a much better job. But then the learned person understands that this is given to me as my quota. It's not mine. I don't need it. What I need for my inner journey has been given. And, other people as spirit souls are the same as me as spirit soul. But this depth of wisdom in terms of understanding I am a spirit soul and my mind and intelligence are separate from me. Even other people's mind and intelligence are separate from them. So what they say and think is not actually them as a person. In the fourth canto Bhagavatam, there is a verse where the devotee is saying, if this person who has committed so many atrocities, am I supposed to hate that person, that spirit soul? Because the spirit soul is completely unblemished. And that spirit soul has passed out of this body. Am I supposed to hate the dead body that has performed these atrocities? It's an inanimate thing. Am I supposed to hate the mind and the conditioning of the person, which is inanimate? Am I supposed to hate the spirit soul? What am I actually hating? There's no need for me to actually hate any of these things. I see that, hate the sin, so to speak.
Justice.
Yes, but I can't hate the person, because that doesn't make sense. But seeing other people as a spirit soul, seeing oneself as a spirit soul, understanding this person is being conditioned in a particular way. And therefore they're acting in a certain way. And I myself am conditioned in a particular way. This is why I'm acting. This is the sign of a learned person. We do this to a small extent when we speak of, for example, if two people are having an argument, you start to say, rather than just looking at the details of the argument, what are the values in this person that are being impinged on, and what are my values that are being compromised that are causing this fight to take place? So we go deeper and we start to disassociate ourselves from those things that cause us tension and difficulty. But the Vedic system goes deeper still. It looks at the difference between the soul, the mind, and the intelligence. And if one comes to a stage where one is able to clearly see, my mind is telling me this, but my intelligence knows this from previous training, and I will choose to act on my intelligence, such a person is actually really spiritually advanced. The distinction between the mind, the voices of the mind, sometimes it feels like we can be talking about a schizophrenic, and this was my impression when I was growing up. Really, sometimes you'd hear Vaishnavacharyas say, oh my stupid mind, why do you do this? Like Raghunath Das Goswami says in Manashiksha, I would be like, is this schizophrenic? No, it's actually not. It is a divorcing of oneself from the voices of one's mind and intelligence, and learning when one should follow the mind or when one should not. So, prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. And with this conception, they think manyate, they consider karta aham, I am the doer, they think.
Sometimes even in devotional service, all of us, I don't know myself, we think that I am doing this. All of us do that. Every single one of us, whatever I am doing it, and we forget that Krishna is doing it. And all of us pretty much are just working on the platform of I did this, I did that. How do we understand that in the material world also the same thing is happening? And also when you come to Krishna consciousness and then actually you're just coming to become a better person and to rise above the level of just I, me, and our, and just for Krishna is the doer. Anything that's happening in the temple, Krishna is the doer. How do we understand that? Is it that we are all just lacking and we're just on path of bhakti and gradually we'll attain that stage, or in this lifetime we won't be able to? How do we understand that?
This will be answered by Krishna later on in the 3rd chapter, training of one's mind and intelligence. So, directly speaking, it would be one, shastric understanding and knowledge, which would at least provide the theoretical basis. But then also associating with those who live in Krishna's mercy. And by associating with their impressions, seeing how they're so happy, just giving everything to Krishna, and understanding that they're an instrument of Krishna's grace in this world, that allows us to give up our fear of thinking, if everything is done by Krishna, then, where's my individuality? I think that's actually the fear. Where's my individuality? Where's my, who am I? Where am I in all this? And if I say I'm just an instrument of Krishna's mercy, then who will take care of me? These tend to be the fundamental insecurities a person has when they tend to ascribe or want to take credit for some activity, which is not wrong, by the way. We'll come to that. Which is not wrong. It's for that level, it's okay. But we'll talk about that later as we go on through the verses. But it's an important question to address. So Prabhupada says, and he's talking about the distinction between one who is in knowledge, one who is not. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there's a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is a doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that's a symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, all his bodily and mental activity should be engaged in the service of Krishna. Text 28. Tattvavittu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matva na sajjate. Translation.
One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty arm, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between working devotion and work within results.
This word guna, guneshu, is important. This describes what the person aspiring for liberation, what their realization tends to be. Now suppose this is my tongue. This ends up being a nose. That's a decent picture. If this is a rasgulla, this is the person's tongue. And here you have, I'm drawing the brain, but really by this I mean the subtle mind. That's the tongue. Now, the tongue is just the location, but inside or placed inside the tongue is the sense of taste. In creation, you know how we go from Prakriti to Mahatattva to Ahankara? Has anybody seen this description? Yeah, sure. So, Prakriti refers to the inert form of material nature, in which the three modes are they're completely inert. They're not going up and down. They're completely stationary. When Mahavishnu glances into Prakriti, he injects time through his glance. And then time, it causes the three modes of material nature to become dynamic. And it molds itself in between to something called Sutra Tattva, and then into Mahat Tattva. At this early stage, the mode of goodness is predominant. In Mahat Tattva, the mode of passion is predominant. And then Mahat Tattva transforms itself into Ahankara, which is in the mode of ignorance. Now, Ahankara, which has a predominance of ignorance, when it further splits itself into something with a little bit more goodness, a little bit more passion, a little bit more ignorance. So Ahankara in the mode of goodness then produces the demigods, or the forms of the demigods, and the mind. Passion produces the intelligence. It produces the 10 senses. So the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the sense of moving one's hands and legs, voice, genitals, and anus, all of these senses are produced in the mode of passion. And in the mode of ignorance, you get the 5 sense objects, which are taste. So here the senses is the sense of taste. Here the 5 sense objects refers to taste, sound, form, etc. And then you have the 5 elements also: earth, water, fire, air, ether. So this is how creation actually comes about. From Ahankara in the mode of, I need a different pen. From Ahankara in the mode of ignorance, one's material body, gross material body, comes about. The 10 senses are located in one's subtle body. Intelligence is located in the subtle body. One's mind is in the subtle body. The Mahat Tattva manifests itself as the Chitta, the repository of the emotion, of the impressions into the subtle body. And the forms of the demigods, they work to reveal sense objects. So what this means is, in this instance, the demigods, they allow the senses, the sense of taste, to function. And when the sense of taste functions, the actual rasgulla landing on the tongue produces the flavor that is interpreted by the mind. Was that okay, or was that confusing?
I'm a little bit confused.
Okay.
I want to understand.
Okay. Any questions on this side? This is how creation functions, and this is how all the elements are manifest.
I'm sorry, because I think I was a bit distracted so much more.
Oh, that's okay. So this is, I wasn't laughing because of that. I know it's genuinely long. This occupies 3 chapters in the second canto of Bhagavatam. So it's extensive. And then also 1 or 2 chapters in the third canto. So it's quite extensive. And then there's references across the Bhagavatam anyway.
And I want to bring it into practice. I don't want theoretical, so I really want to understand it.
This is more useful for someone who wants to understand how various functions of the body manifest. It's useful in Sankhya. So how various functions of the body manifest and how the various qualities of these senses manifest. This knowledge is extensively taken into place by transcendentalists, and its purpose is to understand the distinction between the body and the soul. Remember, that's how we describe Sankhya. So when they understand their body in this level of detail, they're able to distinguish the qualities of the spirit soul away from the qualities of the various elements of matter and the combination of these elements. So Prakriti refers to the 3 modes. Everything in material nature comes from the 3 modes. Here in Prakriti, the 3 modes are inert. By the manifestation of time, they produce a dynamic state of the 3 modes. When the 3 modes further transform, they produce the 5 sense objects and the 5 elements. They produce the intelligence and the 10 senses. And then they produce the demigods, the forms of the demigods and the mind. Now, all of these things are necessary for the spirit soul to be able to function and experience things in this world. The intelligence, the 10 senses, and the mind are located in the subtle body. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The gross elements make up the gross material body. So, the person who is a transcendentalist, when they are tasting a rasgulla, for example, what is the rasgulla made from? Assuming it's not prasad and it's not Krishna's saliva, therefore. But it is ahankara in the mode of ignorance, right? So in other words, it is made of the modes of nature, predominantly of the mode of ignorance, right? The very sense of taste that they have, where do they taste it? On the tongue. So the tongue is made from what? Well, the tongue is a location for the taste, technically speaking. So that the tongue, the physical tongue itself is made by the gross body, but the sense of taste, that comes from ahankara in the mode of passion. Otherwise it wouldn't manifest. And where does the mind, which experiences that sensation, where does the mind come from? Ahankara in the mode of goodness. So really, when I put a rasgulla in my mouth, my mind, which is a transformation of the mode of goodness, is experiencing a taste produced of the mode of passion, and it is tasting an object produced of the mode of ignorance. So this is just the interaction of the modes, is it not? The mode of ignorance, something of the mode of ignorance puts itself on something of the mode of passion, and something in the mode of goodness experiences that taste. Now the question is, does any of this have anything to do with me as a spirit soul? It doesn't. So people who eat a rasgulla and think, oh, this is so wonderful, I am in ecstasy. All they're telling you is that their mind is going up and down in certain, patterns, certain brain patterns, for a gross way of describing it. It's going up, it's going down. I feel good, going up, going down. I am depressed going down. What does this have anything to do with me? So if you really go to a transcendentalist, you say, I'm feeling tired. So? I don't feel like doing it. Your point? Because it's got nothing to do with you. So therefore, guna, guneshu vartanta, meaning that it's just the interaction of the modes of nature with each other. And every sense experience in this world is understood to be just the interaction of the modes.
Just a little bit of a tangent. Why, on the same theme, when you taste somebody tastes it, like my daughter, she just doesn't like the taste of something. One, to get her to try something new is hard, but then when she tries it, she's like, I don't like the taste. But we love it. We're like, how can you not like this? It's fantastic.
Because the sense...
Why is it she doesn't...
have the same taste as us? Because the sense of taste is not like it's one thing for everybody. It is different based on the constitution of the individual. So you can get varieties in sensual experience. If some people drink water, it tastes sweet. Other people drink water, it tastes slightly bitter. Other people drink water, I think it tastes, I forget, there are 3 types of tastes of water based on kapha, vata, pitta, those natures. Kapha, it tastes sweet. For vata people, I think it tastes slightly bitter. For pitta people, it tastes something else. I forget the detail now. But the same sense of taste varies depending on how it is manifest in their subtle and gross body.
And it depends on their age and the changes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the elements can keep changing. The elements keep changing. But the transcendentalist understands that this has nothing to do with me. And this method of analyzing where everything is coming from, this is Sankhya. And those who are Nishkama Karma Yogis, they have usually an extensive training in Sankhya. Because through their intelligence, they are very strictly breaking down all the elements of their body and of material nature to understand exactly where they are, what their desires are in this whole process. It's a common question, actually. The relationship between the intelligence and the mind doesn't necessarily mean that one cannot come from apparently a superior mode of nature. The function of the intelligence is to act, to drive things forward. Therefore, it comes from the mode of passion. But it can drive things in a positive way also. The nature of the mind, its original nature is in the mode of goodness. So its original nature, when it has become peaceful again, it recedes back and it's just calm and peaceful. When someone is, conditioned and trying to experience things of this world, the combination of the passionate, materialistic intelligence associated with their mind in the mode of goodness brings their mind into the mode of passion. But that detail will be described in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam. But it's a good question. It's just different hierarchies which reflect their qualities.
If you're recording this from like the sensing the taste, so where there's action, you think, because if I say, putting rasgulla in my mouth doesn't mean I ate it. I could taste it, but the action would be to chew it, like to basically enjoy it. Or it could be like actually eating it means having, using my hands to basically put it in my mouth. Also action. So that's it, the freedom we got. We got freedom not to actually pick it up and eat, or like I'm just trying to understand like the action where it fits with the.
Well, let's take the example of the pizza on the plate. So my mind is telling me I want it. My intelligence is telling me I've got cholesterol problems, don't take it. I have, as a spirit soul, a choice. Do I listen to one voice or the other? And I decide, okay, no, I think it's okay, I've balanced my diet, I want to eat it. So when the mind makes its decision, it activates the sense of, holding is one of the working senses. It activates, the sense of sight and the sense of picking up to look at the pizza and pick it up. Again, moment to moment you have a choice. You have this pizza, there's really a lot of cheese here. My intelligence is telling me this is going to give me, heartburn or something later on. But my mind is telling me it's super tasty. okay, I'll take half. And then the sense of you put it in your mouth, you bite it, and then you chew it. So yes, the activity happens at different levels. When you're picking up the pizza, when you're putting it in your mouth, when you're chewing it, etc. Does that answer the question? Okay. You had a question? No. Okay. So is this okay? Guna?
Just one last.
Yeah.
You said the sense of taste comes in the mode of passion.
Yeah.
Does that mean that if we are tasting and that is our mode of passion, and that's like if we are disliking something, where I mean this explanation is actually transcendentalists take everything as neutral, like they just eat it for the sake of, like, because they need to eat, but that's it.
Well, the fact that these things come out from the mode of passion is meaning that they are inspired with certain qualities. The senses are naturally made to act, just as the intelligence is made for action, it's made for driving things forward. So the mode of passion naturally inspires things with action, with a sense of moving things forward.
So it's about everybody, that means it's the mode of passion that encourages us to taste.
Yes, yes. But then when someone actually transcends the modes of nature, it's no longer the mode of passion. Their senses are directly impelled by Krishna Shakti. And when Lord Chaitanya or his associates would taste Mahaprasadam, they would taste the nectar of Krishna's lips in that prasadam. So it's a different thing altogether. But this is...
Eating the Mahaprasad and the sweets in the temple, that is beyond the modes of goodness?
It's usually a mixture. For devotees, it's partly impelled by the mode of passion at least, but also because they're cultivating affection for Krishna, to the degree of their advancement, they're able to taste the nectar of Krishna's lips. Can we move on? Sorry. Is it a quick question?
When I identify myself as I and mine, is that different ahankara from this?
No. Ahankara is a sense of false ego. So it is what you identify with. The ahankara is a sense of, I am Indian, or I am so-and-so's husband, father, like that. And the spirit soul identifies with the ahankara, identifies with that false nature. From ahankara comes a false sense of identity, which the spirit soul identifies with. Does that answer the question?
When it goes to the mind too.
The mind supports the ahankara. The mind's function is to accept and reject. So what it does is, for example, if my sense of identity is that I am so-and-so's father, and my mind will give me desires to support that identity, and will reject things that take me away from that identity. So my mind will naturally function in order to feed my child, spend time with my child, and take happiness in spending time with that child. And it will reject things that take me away from that child. So the mind will support the ahankara. So which is why following one's mind only deepens, following one's feelings will increase one's conditioning, will increase one's tenure in this world, because the mind supports the ahankara. The way to counteract that is to train one's intelligence spiritually and follow those principles, which takes one away from the mind's desire to very strongly defend its sense of false ego. Okay. So, ahankara vimudatma, 28, guna guneshu vartanta, iti matva na sajjate. Sajjate means attached. So such a person doesn't become attached, knowing matva, or understanding, that tattva vittu mahabaho, O mighty armed one, the person who is actually in knowledge, guna karma vibhagayo, knowing the difference between the modes of material nature and the actions that they imply. Prabhupada here, his word for word is, of works under material influence. Guna guneshu vartanta. It is just the modes of material nature which are inspiring such activities. And iti matva na sajjate. They understand. Understanding this point, they think, I have got nothing to do with this. They don't connect themselves to that entire experience. Na sajjate. I am not connected. I'm not attached. I'm not connected here. I've got nothing to do here. Text 29. Prakriter guna sammudha sajjante guna karmasu tan akritsna vidho mandan kritsna vinna vichalayet. Translation.
The world of God knows of material nature. The ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge.
So the past two verses have described both the realizations of somebody who's ignorant and someone who's in knowledge. And text 29 is similar to text 26. The wise man, understanding the difference between his own mind and intelligence, understanding that all these feelings that they have, really that they come from one's conditioned experience. Understanding that other people who are also expressing, I can't do this, or this is difficult for me, or, I want to do this. All of these come from their conditioning. Rather than seeking to cut it, they engage them appropriately. So text 29, from 26 through to 29, how a wise man understands himself, understands his experiences, and understands others, and therefore appropriately deals to help others grow, has been described. Text 30. Now, text 30 through to text 35 are Krishna's concluding instructions to Arjuna regarding prescribed duties. In our study, we discussed that the third chapter can be understood in 4 natural sections. Text 1 through to text 16, text 17 through to text 29, and text 30 through to text 35, and text 36 through to text 43. So we discussed these natural sections, and now Krishna is beginning to summarize his instructions to Arjuna in this section, and he's going to tell him what happens to people who follow his directions, what happens to those who do not. Text 30. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudyasva vigata jvaraha. Translation.
Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your work unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desire for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargic heart.
So, Krishna is actually instructing Arjuna on a much higher level than simply Nishkama Karma Yoga, because Arjuna is a devotee. What he's saying is, Mai sarvani karmani, engage all of your activities for me. Sanyasya adhyatma chetasa. So Baladev Vidyabhushan says that this sanyasya adhyatma chetasa actually means it's kind of like a servant serves the king. They see themselves as being the king's servant, and they think that whatever I'm doing is inspired by the king's directions. Whatever I do is for the king's benefit, and the king will take care of me automatically. So this verse is actually, it is not just for the Nishkama Karma Yogi, it's actually for the devotee. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya adhyatma chetasa nirashir, without the desire for profit, Prabhupada says, nirmama, without the desire for ownership, without feeling like, this is mine. Just as the king's servant does not think, the king has asked me to collect jewels from the treasury for him to wear. He doesn't think that, these possessions are somehow connected to me, and, only through me can anyone access this treasury. He doesn't identify with the treasury or with anything else. Meaning that the relationship between the servant and the king is, is very, very strong. And so the servant therefore sees himself or herself as being an instrument of their master's desires. Seeing oneself as being a master of one's desires, offering everything to the master for his pleasure, and to feel as if I am being inspired, I'm living in their mercy, in their grace, is Krishna's instruction, and his application to Arjuna of the previous section. So Prabhupada writes, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. Now this phrase has always struck me very deeply, because think about it. How many times in the day do we need do we feel like we need a space for ourselves? Even if it's 5 minutes. How many people do you see at work, they kind of take a small break and they look at their phones? First thing, the moment they walk out of their desk, out comes the phone. And is anybody sending any messages, any emails, responding? Or if nothing is there, they go to Facebook or Twitter or post something. How many people have seen this? How many people have done it? I have. But see, this is the most natural thing. You want a break for yourself. What does that mean? No matter how strongly we actually like our work, the reality is that that's not what we identify with. If somebody needs a break, it means that they're taking some time out for themselves, separate from the service that they're rendering. And this happens to us in devotional service. It happens to us in household duties all the time. Initially you get, people who do a little bit and then take a long break. And and then there are yet others, I'm the same way. And you can ask my wife. And there are yet others, and my mother's an example of this, and my wife's mother is an example of this. They don't stop working. There's just one after another, they just keep doing household duties again and again and again. But the question is, what impels one to act as if they're in military discipline? It must mean that their sense of identity is very strongly connected to Krishna, because that's where their nourishment is coming from. They don't have to go outside of their relationship with Krishna to get nourishment for themselves. They don't have anything to do outside of their service. That's who they are. And in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada actually writes, he quotes the verse of pure bhakti, anyabhilashita shunyam, and then he quotes the second verse, sarvapadi vinirmuktam, and then which says that one has to remove all one's material identification and completely identify with Krishna. And then Prabhupada writes, this is the platform on which one can actually practice pure devotional service. What Prabhupada is saying is that if one identifies as a servant of Krishna, then it is so natural to one's entire life to be a service to Gopinath. But just like if a mother identifies with her children, or father identifies with their children, it is very natural for them to just be happy doing things for their children. But if we identify as being Krishna's servant, to the extent that we are very strong in that sense of identification, just as a servant might identify with their master or king, it's very easy to just, one service, second service, third service, fourth service. My sleeping is service. My waking up, my taking a bath, my brushing my teeth is a service, because I'm preparing. My cooking is a service. My taking care of family is a service. And it really becomes like that as military discipline. There's no time for, the word spacing out? I mean, like you take some space out. Or the mind trips out, spaces out somewhere. That doesn't happen. This phrase...
So you're saying you're more present in what you do in the world.
You're absorbed in your services.
You're associating what you do, everything to Krishna.
Yes. Yes. And you don't... Well, it's not just that you could be present in the moment, but just take breaks away from your day-to-day services. But here you don't have that inclination. In Vrindavan, there's no time, my spiritual master would always say, in Vrindavan, there's no time for a coffee break. It's constant service. There's no time to pull out a phone, what did my parents say, or what does my spouse or children say? There's no time for that. Nobody does that there. But it's like, one has to be perfectly Krishna conscious, Prabhupada says, to execute one's duties in military perfection. If one gets to this level, one is at a very, very high level of devotional service. One can take nourishment from seeing every part of one's day as being service. It's really, really joyful to do this.
This was reading in Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 6. I don't know, Bharat Maharaj, when Prabhupada was saying how it's imperative to not stop the process. Every part of devotional service is so important and nothing should be skipped, otherwise fall down can happen. Bharat Maharaj had the fall down, Prabhupada explained. What this is so insignificant.
Yeah. In the ashram, they would tell us that, if your mind has a tendency to go here and there, don't give yourself space or time. Just have services. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. This actually was my favorite sentence from the entirety of the first 6 chapters. Such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitutional position of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. Such beautiful sentences. One has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Supreme Lord, and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Lord without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. Nirashir means one has to act on the order of the master, but should not expect fruitive results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real purport of Mai unto me. And one who acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. His consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And if there's any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigatajvara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. This was Krishna's instruction to Arjuna. The example that I personally really like to understand degrees to which this instruction is applied is if you have a government and you have a tax collector, when that person is going to individual houses, sometimes we say, in jokes, the word tax collector is used to describe someone who's unwelcome, who's demanding, who's going to extract something very valuable from us. But a tax collector is just doing his job. Now, when so much money is passing through the tax collector's hands, what should the tax collector feel? That is just, I'm just doing it on behalf of the government. I've got no enmity with this person, or no connection with the person I'm dealing with necessarily. Rather, I see this person as connected to the government, and I just, do what the government needs to get done here. Now, to the extent that one completely identifies with the government or with the Prime Minister, it will be a completely neutral transaction. One will have nirashir, no desires with that individual apart from completing what service the government has given. One will not have a sense of possession towards that money. But if one only partially identifies with the government, to that extent, there is both a sense of connection with the person that one is dealing with, as well as some level of possession of the money. I brought in so many millions of dollars. Other tax collectors haven't brought in as many. So I need to get a higher cut in terms of my pay. And these degrees reflect the difference between pure bhakti and someone who is attached in this world. But to the extent that one develops that sense of very strong identity with Krishna, to that extent one can actually be nirashir and nirmama, without a sense of, a personal desire involved in that individual transaction, or a level of possession involved in whatever one is dealing with. 31. Ye me matam midam nityam anutishtanti manava shraddhavanto nasuyanto muchyante tepi karmabhi. Translation.
Those persons, they execute their duties according to my injunctions and will follow this teaching faithfully. Without envy, become free from the bondage of fruit of actions.
Purport. The injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom, and therefore is eternally true without exception. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Krishna consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. There are many philosophers who write comments on the Bhagavad Gita but have no faith in Krishna. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruit of action. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, vigata jvara, with energy, without lethargy, without thinking of what's personally happening, just thinking of the Lord's purpose in this activity, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. We will read this in conjunction with text 32. Yetva etadabhyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimodam stan viddinasthana chetasaha. Translation.
But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered of the knowledge, rest of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors of perfection.
So both of these injunctions indicate that there is no other way of dealing with the material world in such a way that one can actually grow and transcend our actual innate conditioned nature. Many people, Prabhupada writes, they speak of the Bhagavad Gita and they say, actually one should not fight. Prabhupada would quote one famous commentator, Gandhi actually, Mahatma Gandhi. And Prabhupada would say, so this person is saying, he reads the entire Bhagavad Gita and he advocates the philosophy of non-violence. What is he understood from the Gita? And further Gandhi would say, so the battlefield of Kurukshetra is like our body, the Pandavas are like the five senses. And he would give some kind of, he would make the whole Bhagavad Gita into some kind of analogy. And then Prabhupada would say, this person has no regard for Krishna or his teachings. How can one understand the Gita and think that one should be non-violent? Or how can one understand the Gita and think that what Krishna is saying is wrong? What Krishna is describing for Arjuna in his specific situation is a manner of dealing with the world, no matter how uncomfortable it is, so that not only he, but everyone will benefit and will actually act on the platform of the spirit soul and come closer to their original actual nature. Sorry, Mataji, can you do that a little bit afterwards, if that's okay? Okay. Just a little quiet. But it's not like someone can just move away from one's activity and not do anything. That will lead one to further bondage. It's not like one can just completely act according to how one feels or desires. There's a fine line in between. Yes, we act according to our nature, but we act understanding that we are actually servants of Krishna. And acting in that way, as Krishna described in the previous verse, in verse 30, is the actual tightrope of walking in this world so that we are not touched by it. And one who follows this instruction without, this word envy is interesting. Sometimes we think, I'm not envious of Krishna. I think, I don't understand the instruction maybe. I think it should be different. But the word envy is usually associated with a sense of pride. In the sense that I think, my opinion is important. And I think I should not be fighting. I think violence is bad. And one associated with that pride will think, oh, Krishna is saying something. No, it's actually not quite like that. One should actually act in a slightly different way. Or one should take Krishna's instruction applied in one place and not in another. That envy, it's called envy because it's a manifestation of our independence. We don't want someone's instructions to mold or to modify our way of thinking. That's why it's called envy. But this is actually the only way of, it's actually like a tightrope. You can't move left, you can't move right. It's a tightrope. You can't not work, you can't actually just work in an attached way. But working with this principle actually takes us across the material world. Text 33. Sadrisam cheshtate swasya prakritir jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Translation.
Even a man's knowledge acts according to his own nature. For everyone follows the nature he has acquired from three modes.
Sorry. So, O Arjuna, you're thinking that you will act as a brahmana and you will act in a non-violent way. That will be to your detriment. Don't do that. Your nature has to be engaged. And so Prabhupada translates, gives a purport. Unless one is situated on the transcendental platform of Krishna consciousness, he cannot get free from the influence of the modes of material nature. Therefore, even for the most highly educated person on the mundane plane, it is impossible to get out of the entanglement of Maya simply by theoretical knowledge or by separating the soul from the body. Just by understanding I'm the spirit soul is not sufficient. One has to perform some activity in that line. There are so many so-called spiritualists who outwardly pose as advanced in the science, but inwardly or privately are completely under the particular modes of nature which they are unable to surpass. Academically, one may be very learned, but because of his long association with material nature, he is in bondage. Krishna consciousness helps one to get out of material entanglement, even though one may be engaged in his prescribed duties in terms of material existence. Therefore, without being fully in Krishna consciousness, one should not give up his occupational duties. No one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so-called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and try to attain Krishna consciousness under superior training. Thus one may be freed from the clutches of Krishna's Maya. Text 34. Indriya syendriya syarte ragadvesha vyavastitau tayorna vashamagachet tauhi asya paripantino. Translation.
There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization.
So, indriyasya, indriyasyarte. For each of the senses, indriyasya, associated with certain sense objects, again indriyasya, there are certain feelings of attachment, raga, and certain feelings of aversion, dvesha. Vyavastitau, it is situated. It is not situated in the objects themselves, but associated with the objects, there is such an impression situated in the senses and the mind, the sixth sense, so to speak. So Krishna is saying that on this path, there will be things that you would like to do, which actually you shouldn't be doing. Baldev Vidyabhushan gives the example of talking to other men's wives. He says that, the mind is naturally inclined to do this, but knowing the consequences for one's inner growth and the fact that it is sinful, one should not fall under the influence of such a prescription of the mind. At the same time, there may be an aversion to associating with sadhus. Oh, this is too much, or waking up in the morning. But one should not fall under that particular aversion. So associated with every object or every person or every situation, there are some things that attract us and some things that cause us aversion. In either case, we should not fall under the principle of the mind. Because remember, the mind protects the false ego, that's its function. Rather, one should act according to the intelligence based on existing principles. One should decide certain principles. I will sleep by 8:30, I'll sleep by 9. After so-and-so time, I should not be looking at my mobile phone. Before so-and-so time in the morning, I won't touch my phone. And one should act according to those principles. The TV, if I have one at home, will only be switched on from this time to this time. Otherwise, it'll be completely disconnected, etc. One should have certain principles that one is working on and not focus on attachment and aversion, because that will take one completely away. Now, this verse will be elaborated on later on. Really important. Text 35. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharmat swanushthitat swadharme nidanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. Translation.
It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than others' duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous.
The word bhaya means fear. It is bhayavaha, the cause of great fear. Just imagine if, for example, a warrior whose nature it is to take action and respond decisively in a crisis decides to become peaceful, like a brahmana. It would be completely chaotic because it would be completely against this person's nature. By repressing this person's nature, that nature and that emotion will come out at a time when it is not meant to come out. We'd given the example of Arjuna previously. Had he run away from the battle and he was just, a beggar in the forest, taking whatever would naturally come to him, the moment he would hear of Abhimanyu's death, everyone's death is preordained. The moment he would hear of Abhimanyu's death or his son Iravan's death on the battlefield, do you think he's going to sit there quietly? He's going to storm and rage into the battle and release all kinds of deadly weapons. And in that anger, when one is controlled by one's mind, one can release weapons, for example, that are not meant to be released against ordinary soldiers. Imagine if one does not take, decisive action against a criminal at the right time. Rather, let me just forgive him, let me just, set him loose. And if that person commits further activity, what kind of consequence it can have on society? So, in every situation, one should, for oneself and for society, engage in one's prescribed duties, which are prescribed according to one's nature. As the previous verses said, repression cannot accomplish anything. It may appear like, my duty has some parts to it that are troublesome, that are not ideal. And the example given is, for Kshatriyas, there's violence. For Vaishyas, or for businessmen, there's an element of lying. But in either case, one should accept the fact that in this type of work, such irregularities are sometimes it's unavoidable. But it doesn't matter. If one focuses on working for Krishna's pleasure and working for inner purification of heart, working for increased taste for hearing and chanting, those small faults in the performance of one's duty are nothing. They're taken away by Krishna. But rather, if one gives up what one is meant to do and runs away, that is sinful and in the long run will be detrimental to our own nature. Imagine parents who decide, I don't want to become attached to my children, and they just go away. I mean, it's terrible. They destroy their children's lives, one, so it's sinful, and two, for themselves, their own nature as a mother, it's not satisfied, or as a father, it's not satisfied. So even if one is a terrible parent to begin with, one takes up that service and then matures into that service, but one doesn't stop doing it. So Shreyan Swadharma, Shreyan means superior, is Swadharma. Viguna means even if it's faultily performed. And there are some things that I am terrible at in doing it. But if I stop doing it, or we may be terrible at being parents, or at working, or maintaining the house, or what have you. Still, even if it's filled with fault, one's prescribed duties according to one's own nature is much better to do than paradharmat swanushtitat, duties prescribed for others. Swadharma nidanam shreya, because in one's duty alone will one achieve perfection. Paradharmo bhayavaha, in performing another person's duty, it can be completely destructive for ourselves and for others also. Okay, so this finishes the third section. Now, Arjuna is going to ask a question in this last section. If you go back to the verse 34, so Krishna is saying, in the senses and in the mind, indriyasya indriyasyarte, of the senses, in the mind and in the senses, there is an aversion or an attachment, raga dvesha vyavastito. Situated is a certain level of attachment and a certain level of aversion associated with certain sense objects. But what actually is it that impels someone to act in a way so as to implicate themselves further in this world? He's saying this, if you're talking about the senses or sense objects, so therefore you're talking about the impressions that are formed in the mind from so many previous from previous association, these impressions are inert. For example, because of my having had lasagna from birth, I love lasagna. Now these impressions have been built up. But these impressions are they're dead. They're just like flashes in one's in one's mind. If you say that these are the impressions that are causing the problem, then how is that actually the cause? Or are you saying that the Lord, inspires these impressions in one's heart? Because Paramatma is seated in one's heart. And Krishna says that I who am seated in everyone's heart, from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So, is it that Krishna, who inspires these impressions to come out in one's mind, is he the cause of a person performing sinful activity? And Arjuna's question will be answered in this verse, in this section. So Arjuna is trying to basically find out what is the reason for a person's existence in this material world. That is the essence of his question. Let's read it. Arjuna Hovacha Ata kena prayukto yam papam charati purushaha Anicham api varshneya balad eva niyojitaha. Translation.
Arjuna said, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if anything by force?
Ata means then what, O Krishna? Because Krishna has just spoken about, don't fall under the influence of your attachment or your aversion, act according to your prescribed duty. But then Arjuna is thinking, Ata, but then you've told me that, this attachment and aversion is situated in the senses, and that's going to prevent me from growing further in my own Krishna consciousness. Then, Ata Kena, so it's connected to verse 34. Ata Kena, Kena means, how or by what. Ata Kena prayukto yam. Prayukto means like pushed, prodded, poked. By what is one being pushed or impelled. Papam charati purushaha. So purushaha meaning a man, but purusha also means an enjoyer. So a person who's in this world, who's trying to enjoy in this world, what pushes him, what impels him, chariti means walks, what impels him to perform sinful activity? Anichan api varshne. Anichan means without even that this person desiring this. Sometimes we understand, I don't want to do this. But then one's, the pushing of one's mind, sometimes it just feels like, I can't, I have to do it. And a person does it. And I see this. There are some people, they know like Dhritarashtra. He knew what his son was saying was really bad. And he himself told Krishna, when Krishna came to him and gave him a full presentation on why what he was doing was wrong and what the proper path of duty and dharma was. Dhritarashtra said, "Oh Krishna, I know what you're saying is right. But for me, who am attached to my son, your instructions are like lightning in the darkness of a thunderstorm. My consciousness is as if it is covered by dark clouds. And in the midst of those dark clouds, it's like a flash of lightning, which is your instruction. In that flash, everything becomes clearly illuminated. But then, just as the lightning lasts for a second, the moment you stop speaking, my attachment to my son covers everything up again." And so Arjuna was saying, I see this in people around me. But what is it actually that impels them to act in a sinful way? Papam charati purusha anichan api varshneya balad iva niyojita. Balad means it's as if by force. They're being literally, it's like someone is holding a gun to their head and saying, do it, do it, do it. What is it that impels them? Text 37. Shri Bhagavan Ovacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyenam Iha Vairinam. So this is Krishna's answer to the question. Why is a person conditioned fundamentally in this world? So Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha. This, what impels him, it comes from the mode of passion. And it is Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. It is this desire to enjoy in this world. Kama, which when frustrated becomes Krodha. So when Krishna says Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, he's addressing Arjuna's implicit question. Because Arjuna is thinking that there are some things that are impelled by lust or by desire to enjoy, and some which are impelled by anger. Like if I'm really angry with somebody, I might hit them. But Krishna is saying that actually anger is a transformation of lust. Kama esha, krodha esha, this basic desire to enjoy in this world, which frustrated, transforms itself into anger, a frustration. It's born from the mode of passion. Mahashano, it is a great eater. Ashana means to eat. Mahashana, it eats everything. And here Baldev Vidyabhushan quotes a verse from the Mahabharata where he says, knowing that all the world's riches and its wealth, its properties, its women or men are not enough to satisfy a single person. One should be satisfied with what one has and live peacefully. Meaning, there's an often quoted saying, there's enough in the world for everyone's need, there's not enough for everyone's greed. But it is this overwhelming desire to enjoy, to expand one's field of enjoyment. That desire which comes from the mode of passion, which has no limit, no satiation. And here the word that is used is vairinam. It is an enemy. No matter how much you succumb to this particular desire, its demands only grow. And the word mahapapma means that it is so sinful that it can only be controlled by smacking it. meaning that there are different ways of controlling people. For example, you can control them with sweet words. I don't think this is right, I think you should not do this. Or you can negotiate with them. Okay, you do this, but you do it in this way, and in return you will get this. So this is called Sama, Dama, Beda, Dadda. There are typical means of negotiation. You either conciliate them with sweet words, or you give them some gifts, or you put them against each other, and then therefore they forget their plans. But with regards to this overwhelming greed to kind of expand itself in this world, this overwhelming desire is so sinful, and for very sinful people, there's only one solution. You have to hit them. You have to keep them down. So, Baldevidya Bhushan says, the only way to deal with this karma is sometimes to just knock it on the head. You can't allow it to just overwhelm you. But Mahapapma, it is very sinful. The only way of controlling it is to knock it. Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhi Enam Ihaverinam. Know that this desire to enjoy is your great enemy. It transforms itself into lust, and it is this desire to enjoy that when these impressions come into your mind, you accept that which is favorable to your desire, or try and push things away with anger that are unfavorable. And so one's entire life is pushing and pulling things that are favorable, pushing things away that are unfavorable. And this desire to enjoy takes every impression that the mind puts forward, every circumstance, and then tries to satisfy its overwhelming greed. But by satisfying it, it's all-devouring. You cannot satisfy it. So Prabhupada says, second paragraph, the Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many for his ever-increasing spiritual bliss. And the living entities are parts and parcels of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence. But by misuse of their independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. This material creation is created by the Lord to give facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill these lustful propensities. And when completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire into their real position. So even though this point, it feels like, yes, I've heard this so many times before, but so far, this is the deepest insight yet given into the Bhagavad Gita for our conditioning in this world. And this is like a seed verse in that way. We have unknowingly quoted this verse very, very often. That is our desire to be separate from Krishna, desire to enjoy ourselves and experience things in this world. We quote that very often until it almost becomes like a click answer, a cliched answer. But throughout this whole process, if you think about the journey that Arjuna has gone through, he has been in a circumstance where his desires are being frustrated. By piety, he's gone to his spiritual master, and his spiritual master has shown him how to act in this world so as to get the ultimate benefit for himself and for others. And he's told him that on this path, the obstacles are your attachment and aversion, which prevent you from acting for your internal growth. And Arjuna's asking, but what is it that impels someone to act against their own growth? Even if they know that it's not good for them, what impels them to act as if by force? And this is Krishna's answer to that question. It is incredibly deep. And sometimes I find for myself, even if it feels like a cliched answer, if I just meditate on that verse for some time and allow the depth of that verse to sink in, it just lodges itself in one's heart. But this verse is extremely profound and very, very important.
I have a question. Does this mean when the service attitude is transformed into propensity to sense enjoyment, is it talking about work outside or even inside?
It's talking about prema being transformed into kama. So, that verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Is it when we are doing service inside the temple also, sometimes it can become into a propensity to sense enjoyment?
Oh, it's a general statement in every situation. In every situation. What it says is that the original prema of the living entity for Krishna is transformed into kama. And earlier in the Prabhupada gives example of milk being transformed into yogurt by the influence of tamarind or a sour agent, which means that the original love for Krishna, touched by the modes of material nature, or touched by a desire to be independent of Krishna, gets transformed into lust, a desire to enjoy separately from him.
Again, my question is...
It applies to service within the temple and service outside.
So it's related to everything.
Because it's about us.
Yeah, okay.
I'm in the temple, I'm doing something, I'm still affected. I'm outside the temple, I'm doing something, I'm still affected.
So even the service attitude sometimes, so it is, can be transferred into propensity to sense enjoyment, and they can come under the sway of lust.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the sense that any desire that we may have to enjoy in this world separately from Krishna, that happens in the temple also. Like imagine I go for the Mahaprasadam stall, which I do, and I take a lot of prasadam, which I do. I mean, there is some desire there to enjoy separately from Krishna, right? I mean, it can be as simple as that, or if I'm, hypothetically in some position of management in the temple, I can direct people, boss people around. That's also a desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. I'm enjoying the position, not enjoying the. I'm not trying to please Krishna. Any desire which has my pleasure as the focus, not Krishna's pleasure as the focus, that is kama. But its original nature is to please Krishna, which is prema, and that's what Prabhupada means. We will finish with verse 38. Dhumena vriyate vanir yata dharsho malena cha yate no bhavrito tata te nedamavritam. Translation?
As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of his lust.
So, depending on the degree to which one's propensity to enjoy is manifest, to that extent, the original identity and knowledge of the spirit soul, which is as a servant of Krishna, is covered. And if someone is covered by the mode of ignorance, the analogy that's given here is like a child covered by the embryo. Its form, its shape, its function can hardly be seen. For all practical purposes, you don't even know that the embryo exists or that the child exists. When covered by passion, you can see something of the form, but its quality, its function is hidden because it's like a mirror covered by dust. A mirror covered by dust doesn't have its proper function coming out. But in the mode of goodness, which is still a form of conditioning, that conditioning is called fire covered by smoke. In other words, it's functioning and it is a useful status to begin spiritual life from or to continue spiritual life in, because it still allows us to act according to our nature in some way. But to the extent that we are in either the mode of passion, goodness, passion, or ignorance, to that extent the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna is manifest. And it really takes us away from Krishna's lotus feet. We can actually look at our own heart and understand the degree